And welcome to the latest episode of Hung Chin Hon or Sweatin Money. Let me start off with a disclosure. We may or may not have ownership or other positions in the stocks mentioned on the show. Don't buy stocks based solely off of what you hear from this podcast. And always do your homework and research before buying and investing in stocks. I'm your host, Kong, along with my co-host, Keepson. I'm going to get it in before it cuts you off. All right.
Well done.
Yes, thank you. So let's take a look at what's in the news.
I'm afraid to look.
No. Activist investor Carl Icahn says the U.S. government is turning U.S. corporations into tax exiles in that our tax laws are so complicated and are so disadvantageous to U.S. corporations that they're forced, like Pfizer, into doing an inverse buyout of Allergan, for example. So if your tax laws are any complicated as an individual, maybe Icahn has a good point for these corporations. Would you agree, disagree?
I would say I disagree, and it's kind of the same issue that we have with laws. You know, like why is the law book so damn complicated? Why can't it just be simple, like be good? Well, because the question is, when it's very simple, then people interpret it. And they're like, what does be good to me? Like, be good mean? It's be good to yourself, obviously. And that's why I'm taking stuff from other people, because it says to be good to yourself. Or people say, oh, be good as in being a good man. You shouldn't be taking stuff from other people, and so on and so on. And because of these massively random interpretations, people start defining it, and then become more and more and more specific. And over time, it evolves the law into a very complicated, like, I don't know how to describe the word, but like labyrinth, there you go, of like laws and like things like clarifications and specifications, And then they go, what does good mean? And they start defining all those words. What does plaintiff mean? Start defining all these things and so on, victim and crime and so on. And this, I think part of it is just that it's human nature to try to minimize their costs and maximize their gain. And then they're thinking, you know what, if we can, loosely interpret of what sales are to like sales being domestic or sales international, and maybe, since there's double accounting laws, we don't want to account for it twice, maybe we take advantage of these things. And before you know it, you have like a really, really complicated tax system. And I think perhaps, better people than myself and who are well versed in the history of why these laws were created in the first place can look into and say, hey, can we actually simplify it? And if Obama is given any type of credit, is that he's oftentimes mentioned that there's way too many tax loopholes. And basically, the complexity of the tax law isn't so much that it's costly, but it's so complicated to avoid paying the taxes. If they basically just paid the maximum amount, I don't think there's any type of complication. But they're saying that, well, you know what, like technically we're supposed to be paying 50%, but technically because of this we should have this type of exception, so we should bring it down to 35. And then since we have this other thing and do charitable donations, we'll bring it down to 25. And before you know it, these guys are paying like 50% or no tax at all. Like Google is a clear example. I think there's like a few reports that they didn't even pay any taxes due to international tax law exceptions.
Well, I think I'm going to have to take a contrarian viewpoint on this, because if you know how the history of taxes came about, like the first federal income taxes came about in I think about 1915 or so, and that was at the start of the First World War, then known as, the Great War. So in order to fund this, there was a quote-unquote temporary measure that was introduced. Of course, now we know that it's not temporary, and in fact, it's gotten a lot complicated since then. Not going to get into the specifics of how we generated, revenue before income taxes, but knowing the way the government is, I can't remember, there's a specific rule where it's like you try to accommodate a certain amount of bandwidth or traffic, and yet by doing so it ends up creating more traffic issues. And whenever you try and add a lane to a highway, you think it might relieve congestion, but then it actually ends up making it worse, right? Because people are like, oh, hey, there's another lane. I'm going to use more of that, and then all of a sudden, you're no one's really getting anywhere again. And I think that's the same thing um, that's happening with the U.S. federal government's way of spending money. The more tax revenue it generates, the more money it's going to spend. And in fact, it's actually built into the system that they have to do it this way. So with every successive year, the federal government's budget is going to exceed the previous year. And so it's going to ask for more taxes, more and more taxes every year. So do we as individuals and corporations need to pay as many taxes as they say we need to? I don't think so.
Well, I think we should limit the breadth of the discussion to either the corporate taxes or individual taxes, because individuals, especially more than 50% of America, do not have the tax evasion tools that most major corporate giants have access to.
Right. No, I agree with you. But I don't think that the merely closing loopholes is going to help. It's only going to drive these people even further outside this country. And at that point, I do have to agree with Icon.
Well, what was Icon's statement on it?
Well, he basically says that because the tax laws are so complicated. So, for instance, like you were mentioning with the deductions, right? So when a foreign corporation tries to bring back some of their profits, they get taxed on it by the U.S. government. But then, of course, they already get taxed on it by local government because the U.S. government says, once you bring the money back here, then you have to be taxed on it again. But they're already taxed on it by the country of sales.
I think it's a little bit of a challenge, because then let's say you're like Google, for example. There's an article in 2012 that basically said that Google was able to shelter $10 billion in revenue from being taxed altogether by exploiting a lot of these complicated no double taxation laws, and then basically redefining what it means to be like what is the source of revenue, like how do you define that and how you source that, and how is it like, for example, let's say everyone's headquartered in like Los Angeles, but then we do all the business in China. Then you pay your employees, how do you account for that tax difference? I think part of the complexity in the tax code is due to the part of the complexity in the global commerce. I mean, if anything, if like let's say really want to simplify the tax code, just don't bother deducting anything.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. And I think that's what everybody is saying, not just for corporations, but also for individuals as well.
Yeah, but then you're gonna have another thing, where basically, well, there's two counterpoints. Is that once you say do not deduct anything, then you lose the purpose of the original purpose behind the deduction. For one, part of the deduction could probably come from avoidance of double taxation. Another part of the deduction could be just like basically money you just don't have. Let's say you borrowed money as a corporation and you're financing it, you're paying interest, you borrowed the money, you cannot count that as income. And basically interest that you expended out to pay for the loans should not be part of your income either. So that's why they have these tax deductions in certain regards. This is just basic individual taxes. I'm pretty sure that the corporation tax code is a little more complicated. Now let's say we did simplify the tax code and say no deductions. Well, another person is going to say that the taxes in the United States are far too high. And then
right, so that's why a lot of people are saying that you take away the loopholes and then you lower taxes.
Well, it's a possibility, but I think the only people that are truly qualified to take away the loopholes are people who are well versed in the those who are not, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So there's a reason why we had these deductions in the first place. And most of the time these deductions are put in place because it, like for example, like why do people get Medicare discount? Like why does paying for medical benefits is actually a deduction you can deduct if your basically itemized deduction exceeds your standardized deductions? It's mainly because they thought, you know what, you're already sick, you know, that you shouldn't be penalized for being sick. So that's why there's a deduction. What about loans? Well, why is there deduction on loans and interest expenses? Because you're borrowing money. You're in a hardship. You're under hardship already. You shouldn't be paying interest on things you had to borrow money for, you know. And then the list goes on. Before you know it, you have a very complicated deduction system. Or we simply say you shouldn't have deductions, period. But then you're like, well, I was being extremely charitable. I should be punished for it. It's a back and forth thing. And a lot of these laws have a lot of history behind it. But that being said, is that it's very clear that these deductions and the laws are being exploited. At least most people can see that. I mean, even Warren Buffett is like, you know what, I make way more money than everyone, and I pay a way lower effective tax rate than my secretary. So it's obvious that the tax code needs to be patched. But I don't think it's gonna be as simple like get rid of all deductions as a answer to it. But I think definitely merits some investigation and some cleaning up.
All right, well, moving along. Oh, got to replay that.
Nice.
But when it gets back to that next slide that I accidentally went over, so we on this podcast like to invest our money for a better future, and it's no different than people investing in their future by going to college. However, is it a good return on your investment? When you get a diploma, and hold on, well, so much for that. Yeah.
Is a college diploma a good investment?
Well, yeah. So yeah, you get a diploma, but then on average, people going to college come out with roughly about what, $30,000 worth of debt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then if they don't already have a job, good luck coming out with a degree and looking for one. But even if you do have a job with all that debt, what kind of job are you really going to have?
That's an interesting topic. I believe Ben Bernanke kind of alluded to the current conditions we have now. When he was Fed chair, he had in essence said to the entire world is that when you get your college diploma, make sure that it is tied to a profession that is likely to pay off that degree. So in a way, he's kind of saying, he was kind of hinting that maybe government might cut funding to education, that there might be some challenging times ahead. And I mean, it's an interesting question, really. Is going to college not worth it or not worth it? Well, it depends on your profession, right? If you're going to become a doctor, I would say, yeah, it kind of makes sense, you know. If you're going to become like a lawyer, sure, why not? You know, I mean, depends. Some people with a law degree might say it really depends. Sometimes it's not worth it, but that's until they get a job. While they're unemployed, all these JDs will say, oh, it's not worth it, it's not blah, blah, blah. But once they're employed, they're like, yeah, of course. You know, I make like $500 an hour, why not? You know, doctors easily make six figures on up. You know, a lot of them have really nice houses in San Marino and all these very fancy places. And, you know, and then there's people that, yeah, it depends really. If you look at the MBAs, maybe MBAs might not be worth it, but oftentimes the people who have MBAs also have a very like strong net worth individual, like a network of high net worth that, you know, rich families or whatnot that supports it.
Yet, like if you're talking about one, if you inherited that sort of network through your families, or, you know, let's say if you actually managed to get your way into Harvard, Yale, these Ivy League schools where you can network with other people who do have that sort of money and power, then yeah, it's beneficial. So it's not just the type of jobs that you're going for and the types of degrees that you have to wonder, like that you have to worry about, you know, where you're going to head towards, but you also have to worry about what schools you're going to as well. That also plays a factor, because if you're getting an MBA and it's only at some crappy school or some school that no one's really heard of, do you really get that network advantage?
Well, I'm not sure if it's network, but I think that you did highlight the kind of important point or a viewpoint on it. And is it fair to say college is not worth it? Period. Like I would say that that's a very easy to dispute argument. Is the question is all colleges worth the same? And the answer is no. Like if I went to some like Phoenix, Arizona school online and stuff, and I said I had like a 4 year degree from that, and I try to compete against Ivy League from Harvard, Yale, and
But
Princeton.
don't even talk about Phoenix University. That's such a horrible example because it's been in the spotlight. It's been examined by the government. They don't even have actual regional accreditation for crying out loud.
All right, let's say I went to Donald Trump University.
Oh, even worse. Come on.
I'm just
And
kidding, but
that's part of the whole college industrial complex. The
so
whole educational industrial
yeah, I
complex
mean
in which
yeah,
they're selling you. No, these guys are selling you a future. They're saying, hey, you can quote unquote invest in your future, do this and that or the other thing, and then you come out with a degree. Okay, what's that degree going to get you? And like you said, it all depends on what major you have and what sort of job you're going to have afterwards. But then that's not the message that schools tell you. They tell you follow your dreams, do what you want to do, right? You can go ahead and get a study in East Asian studies or African American studies, right? And maybe you can, eventually work your way into becoming an anthropologist, but what does that mean? You're going to have to be begging people for money, in other words, as they say it, writing grants, and doing research that way. But how much money is that going to give you? Is that going to put food on your plate? Is that going to help you pay off your degree? No.
well, it's to answer the question really is the thing is what is college for? Now, if people and a lot of people ask me the same questions like, oh, why go to school? Like I don't have need for history. I don't need to know about the Native Americans. I don't need to know algebra and all this other crap. I speak English good. I'm like, and then it's like, why do I need to? Why do I need to learn English and all this other stuff? Why do I need to care about Spanish and whatnot and all these topics? And a lot of people misunderstand the purpose of school. Is a lot of people think school is to learn a specific topic, but or just learn a bunch of trivial information. But really, I believe the educational system was designed so to teach people how to learn on their own. Now, long time ago, I asked a professor this. I had a question, really, like, what's the point of a college education? And then, in essence, and a few peers of mine, it's like that. You know what? In a way, it's my professor said that your college degree demonstrates to your employer, your future employer, that you have the capability to learn. Like you might not know the trade, but you've been through a very respected institution and undergone a very rigorous curriculum, and you were able to learn and do well with that information. You were quick to like grab this information and learn and use it. So that's one form of certification. And employers are basically saying that is this candidate teachable, and a college degree will say to the employer that yes, this candidate is, and then he will be useful to you. Now, I have another peer that asked her the same question, and she responded to me. It's like, well, this degree basically says I'm certified smart. And I thought that was a very interesting reply. I was thinking, huh, that's interesting. It's kind of the same way why people get certifications. It's basically saying that you are, in a way, it's in a way of a, there's an example in economics called perfect competition. It's where every single supplier produces the same results, and there's no way for you to differentiate between all of them. So everyone basically they have to force their prices down until there's no profit. Now there is a way to escape from this fate is if you're able to differentiate yourself. Somehow your product is somehow different. And I think a college degree can help you become, like, give you a look different from the rest of your peers. As it's just the same as some sort of experience. If you have experience in the field, it helps differentiate you from your peers. If you have some sort of like, let's say you served in the military, you did some really cool stuff. That could differentiate you. You have
That
some really
doesn't
cool
mean
hobby.
crap. I mean, the last time you guys interviewed a veteran, I mean, what was your thought? It was probably like, well, yeah, you're a badass, but your work experience doesn't exactly qualify you for this job, or it doesn't necessarily relate to this job field. right?
Well, it
There you
depends.
go. So,
It depends on your employer. Let's say
but
you're
and no, I
working in a
understand that, and
skyscraper,
that's the
right?
thing. That's what they're saying is that they're trying to say that everything that you have just mentioned, it all depends, right? And it's not necessarily true. The whole gospel that the universities tell you about, oh, hey, get a degree and for sure you're going to get a job or whatever, that's not necessarily true.
No, university have never said that. The universities say that you pursue education for education's sake.
Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and then, along the way, we'll give you like $30,000 worth of debt. That's great.
Well,
Lesson
that's
learned.
well, it depends on how you look at it. I mean, if you honestly looking to the university as a form of getting a job, a specific job, you're better off going to a vocational school. It really depends on how you look at it. If
People can't even do that nowadays because between a vocational school, like nursing vocational schools, and schools that offer a nursing degree, what are you going to go for? The market is going to go towards that nursing degree, unfortunately. Why? Because most employers, just like you mentioned, that degree is going to, put you out against everyone else. It's going to differentiate you, right? But on top of that, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're smart, but it gives people that impression, right? You're talking about how this degree is supposed to, that your professor said that is supposed to prove that that you can learn, that you're moldable, and that that way the company's going to want you. I don't necessarily agree with that because just now I was talking with a friend and he had an issue where he was on the phone with someone. He does, tech support, and this girl's got a master's degree, and yet she's crying on the phone for 10 minutes because she can't think of a new password.
then you answer her and say, just use a password generator, and then you don't have to spend 9 more
She can't
minutes.
even log in.
Can't think of a new password or can't remember her password.
Well, he can go ahead and reset a new temporary password for her, right?
Sure.
So then it'll ask, here's your old password, in other words, the temporary password he gave her, and then she has to come up with a new one. So she's staying on the phone for 10 minutes. She can't think of a friggin' password. And this person has a master's degree. Smart, huh?
Well, it
So
depends. I
anyways,
mean,
no, no, no,
I
no,
could
no, hold on.
be in English literature. You can't expect me to operate on some guy's heart. I'm like, I can't do rocket science. It's certain people's brains work in a different way, and I assume whatever her top master is in is not in computer science.
Well, if she's at the master's level, you would expect her to be able to think of a password or learn to come up with a new password. Okay? But
Well,
in either case, to take another view as far as the whole learning aspect, or finding a candidate that is moldable, right? A lot of companies say that, but do they really want that? No. What a degree really actually says is that you are $30,000 in debt. You will work like a dog for me because you have no other fucking choice.
you could always declare bankruptcy and start from the beginning. 7 years in.
Okay. Have you actually declared bankruptcy before?
No, but I read up
It's
regarding
it's
it.
not as easy as the Republicans make it out to be. There's an actual like huge giant process that you have to go through.
Well, let's say this. It's in life you're gonna have to take a risk. So let's not factor the debt into play, right? Is it possible that you could be unemployed? Yeah. And then when you're fighting, let's say you want to work at McDonald's, and it's like $7 an hour or $8 an hour or whatever the minimum wage is at right now. Like there's only gonna be one job. That means if there's 100 people applying for the job, 99 will go unemployed. So for in those situations, how do you differentiate yourself? What can give you the edge? Every single person's gonna say they work hard. Everyone's gonna say whatever. At that point, that employee really needs some sort of metric, some sort of thing to look at to differentiate between them. A lot of times, if you're applying to big corporation jobs, How do they screen out candidates? Like everyone wants to work for Google. There's probably like 4,000, 10,000 resumes a day. How can they hire a person? I think all these resumes are probably legitimate. They're all good candidates. But can the company themselves hire a person at minimum wage to go through all 10,000 a day? It wouldn't make any sense to them. So they're going to find some easy way to screen out a lot of people. Part of it is probably college education. Part of it is a GPA. And then after that, once they
Once
cut
again,
it
you are
down
using
to
a bad example because we're talking about Google. They have smart people who have algorithms, who make up these algorithms and say,
fine,
we're
Bank
going to
of
search for this and
America,
that.
Merrill Lynch, let's see, Staples. I don't know, like any type of job that they had to screen people out. There's just more going. There's just. I'm not saying that it's going to guarantee you a job, but if they have to start screening candidates out, there has to be a metric that's easy for them to use to screen candidates out. And at that point, I believe a college education might make that difference.
No, it
Work
doesn't because
experience most
there
definitely.
are more people in college today. So how are you going to stand out with a degree? You're not.
Then you have to push even further. I mean, like college
Wow.
nowadays is like the high school of like maybe like a few decades ago. Before then, sure, you just have a high school education, you're really smart. Before then, you knew your ABCs, you're a well-educated person. Yeah, I think as what it means to be smart keeps changing, evolving. As if we as employees who want to remain competitive just has to keep our edge up. And you understand that no matter what is whenever you have a position, a lot of people out there are unemployed and a lot of people want your position. You have to keep pushing your own boundaries and maintain your edge so that you can stay competitive.
That's the exact same line that was fed to a bunch of people back in the 90s when Clinton first took power. You have to realize that a lot of the factory jobs that we had previously in the 80s and the 70s and even before that, they were all being shipped out to China. And then these people, of course, were out of jobs. So then what do they do? Well, Clinton had initiated the ROP programs, regional occupational programs, which are training programs to provide people with new skills so that they can go find work. But what
Hmm.
happened is that in this economy, a lot of that work was paying a lot less than what they used to make. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying these are the conditions. This is the exact same line that you're feeding these people as Clinton had fed those people then. And honestly, it's not helping all that much.
Well, just think about it this way. Let's say you work at a factory. You make Ford Model Ts. No, no, no. You work at a factory, you make cars. No, you don't work at a factory. Yeah, you work at a factory, you assemble cars. No, you don't, you have a bunch of little shops. In comes a Ford Model T, and it's like the Ford factory chain line, and then bam, you're out of business. Like and then not only that, but you start making Fords by hand, and then you introduce robotics. Bam, all these workers are out of work. Like these technological shifts happens all the time. Like the only constant that we have is constant change. Although that being said, is the more things change, the more they stay the same. But it's you have to keep shifting, and an educated person might be able to keep adapting to such changes. Like
But
sure,
we talk about a lot of people like educated people, quote unquote, or if you want to say people with a degree as if they are highly enlightened people. But are they really, to be honest? Like, do they have that sort of self-reflection that is required to look and examine at their own lives what needs to be done to get that next job, right? You're talking about like for instance, like you just mentioned, a lot of the jobs right now are in the tech sector. Okay, so a lot of people are going to flood that, of course, but these are mainly going to be new generation of people who have grown up with computers. Let's say you got a guy who lost his job, whatever the hell job it was, it doesn't matter. He lost his job, and then he knows that he has to do computers. Okay, so he tries to go back to school for it, but then he doesn't get it. But even then, let's say he does. Okay, then he has to face age discrimination. He's close to being 50. All right, I mean, and he probably hasn't saved enough for retirement. So what is he going to do? Right? He's close to retirement age, but not quite there. How is he going to get a job? How is a degree going to
all right,
help? How
let's
is
let's
another
turn this
degree going to help
around.
this
Let's turn
guy?
this around, Kong. Let's turn this around, okay? They're focused on college. What in life can guarantee you work? There's nothing in life that can guarantee you work. So why is college an exception?
And that's exactly what this article is saying. It's breaking through that propaganda that everyone has been given by the educational industrial complex.
Well, let's review the article because I find it hard to believe that CNN would go out and straight up say that college is not worth it, period. I would say that certain degrees are worth more than other degrees. That makes perfect sense
That's
to me.
exactly what they're saying.
Of course it is. I mean, like a degree, a doctor, a degree in medicine is going to be worth more than a degree in liberal arts or like arts or photography. That's not without. I mean,
Yes, and that is practical. I agree with you there, but that's not what the educational industrial complex is telling everybody. What are they saying? Follow your dreams, right?
well, the thing about it is that there's a Chinese saying is actually I believe it's 佛有状元. Is that right? Or so I'm not sure, but the phrase yeah, that's the phrase. And what my point is that I think is that no matter what you do, if you're really good at it, chances are you be compensated accordingly. So like one of these jobs that we do look down on is cooks. You know, like, oh, well, you're gonna be a cook, you're gonna be a fry cook or whatnot, but you're really good at it. You're really good at cooking. You might become the next Iron Chef. You might be the next. You might be the next. What's that British guy's name? Gordon Ramsay. You know, like no, not Gordon Ramsay. Fuck. Is it? It's Gordon something.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could be that guy. And then like, what about art? Oh, artists don't get paid. They don't do any good. You could be the next Van Gogh. The like and what about sports? Oh, no one makes money. Like, why play sports all day? Or why play computer games all day? You could be the next e-sport champion and they get paid bank. You could play basketball, you could be in the NBA. There's a ton of routes that do pan out. But at the same time, is that if we analyzed it, oh, is playing basketball worth it? And yeah.
See, this comes back to another Chinese proverb, 一將功成萬骨枯. For every one general, there are tens of thousands of decaying bones and, ashes, pretty much.
It makes sense. It means that in one success, there's a lot of failures too.
Exactly. And so you can go ahead and list a bunch of these examples of Gordon Ramsay, Bill Gates, or someone, but this is more of a bias that we have of learning towards the successes, but not looking at any of the failures.
I think failures happen all the time. I would be surprised if anyone says getting a college degree guarantees you a job and a successful life in the future. I just don't think any institution is going to straight up say that. If anything, I would believe the institution would say that you would become better educated, and then what you do with it is up to you, and what happens to you afterwards is up on your own. Really, you're a grown-ass man. You moved out of your parents' house or something like that. You're on your own, pretty much.
That's not what I've heard. That's not what people.
Which institution would have said guaranteed job? And if they did, you can sue them. False advertisement. They owe you your tuition money. I believe Trump is being sued right now for his institutions. Mainly because it's not even an educational institution. He lied about it being a university.
They're not going to put it in terms of guaranteed job necessarily, although there are places that do that. No, a lot of let's see, even it's down to your high school counselors. They'll even tell you, oh yeah, get a degree. It'll, up your chances of getting a job. But really, that's not the case anymore, and that's exactly what this article is saying.
Well, there's a time where I got my degree, and I was concerned about my job prospects. Another person did respond to me and says, well, you go to a certain school, it's this type of school. If you can't get a job, then who can? It makes you think. Like you have to differentiate yourself from the regular workforce. Now the question is, if you still can't get a job, then the question is, who can? And not only that, you have a degree, that's great, but you have to understand. A lot of people don't understand like the trends that are in place by the economic trends and political policies that affect everyday life. Part of it is the Republicans did complain about the workforce and saying that our minimum wage is too high and we need to do away with the minimum wage. But what they're saying is that people need to be hired for way less. In fact, instead of $10 an hour, we should be paying them $2 an hour or $3 an hour. That way we have 3 people employed and everyone will have jobs. But at the same time, is that is a job you want and is it a wage that could sustain life? These are a lot of different things, but ultimately is that there's 2 forces, and to make it macro and make it extremely simple, is policies are either geared towards employers, in which case they could lower the minimum wage or basically like super low, or policies are geared toward employees. And whichever side competes for each other, the other side wins. For example, when the employees compete amongst each other for the employer, they drive their own benefits down, and the employer benefits from that. When employers compete for the employee, then the employers have to raise the prices to attract them, and then the employee wins. In this case, the question is like, well, you have to differentiate yourself in such a way that employers will compete for you. Not only that, but let's say the capital is shrinking. There's not as many employers as there used to be, which should be the case soon. We increase the interest rate. We're withdrawing the money from the stock market. This means that we're basically less new firms are opening up, which means that these employees that are in the market now will have to compete harsher against each other for these new jobs. And then how do you differentiate yourself and all that? But even if you're well educated, that's great. You have a degree. But then sometimes real world experience matters more than your educational background. Sure, you're smart with a PhD, but I could hire a person that's college educated with a MBA, like a fresh out of school, or I could hire a person who's been doing this job already for 4 to 5 years. As the workplace constricts, as the workforce constricts, and the companies constrict, they're going to be forced to say, hey, either a new guy or experienced hand. And at that point, your college degree doesn't matter as much. And the question is, I think all these factors come into play, and it cannot be, the article cannot be so blanketing and saying that college is not worth it, period.
No, it's not saying that. It's not saying that. It's saying, as you are saying, that it is not necessarily worth it, and that there are certain circumstances in which it is not worth it. It's actually, the tone is more that there are specific circumstances where it actually is nowadays, when you factor in all the debt that you will have gotten after you come out. So is it a black and white article? No, it is not.
I see. Yeah, as long as it's not a black and white article, I mean, and say this depends on case by case basis, and college degrees should be pursued while thinking about the job prospects and loan repayment abilities factored in, then sure, I think that's just part of making an educated decision in the process. But sometimes, I mean, if you're just interested in the field, like you're a musician and you're interested in musicology, sure, it's not going to pay. I probably wouldn't have a direct correlation with a high-paying gig afterwards. But you do learn a lot about music theory, and it could further your trade, and you could be a better musician afterwards, or let's say you're an artist, you learn a lot about drawing techniques, a lot about art history. Basically, the institution has consolidated information for you and made it quite easy to digest. But is there I mean, a lot of artists, they don't make a lot of money, and it's very common, and even in olden times, for you to be a broke artist as opposed to an extremely wealthy one. I think Van Gogh, his paintings weren't worth anything until after he died. Or for most
but
of
that
these
was back in the days when we didn't respect any sort of artistic, artistic works. These works were not copyrighted. On the other hand, because they weren't copyrighted, they could actually flow freely and not have to worry about paying royalties here and there and all that stuff.
But what's more frightening though is that nowadays we can look at these pieces of art saying that these are undisputable treasures of life and whatnot. But truth be told, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But more so is the valuation is in the eye of the beholder. Sometimes the valuation might not even has anything to do with the piece being good, but simply because it's rare and it's one of a kind. It says something about the person. And the valuation is driven up by super rich people that are determined to possess the art. And somehow it says something about them. What's the difference between a Honda Civic and then a $17 million Lamborghini. Like I don't know. I guess it gets me from point A to point B,
Well,
but it
we're
says
veering
something.
away from the topic of this article, so
Well,
let's
trying to
move
figure
on.
out worth really, but I mean worth is to the person, but just saying not all degrees pay bills well. So not all degrees are highly correlated to paying your bills off. So yeah, but life is what you make of it, really.
All right, and so the next year is what you make of your stocks and your investments. And if you're worried about having stocks that are going to go to be there for a while, you want stocks that are going to be there for a while. Investopedia suggests you aim for companies that do businesses with low-income people who sadly have no other choice but to spend their money on these companies or their products. For instance, most computers running Windows will be cheaper than Macs, which puts more money in Microsoft's pockets for every licensed computer they sell with Windows on it. Then, where are you going to buy that computer? From a low-price retailer like Walmart, right? Not looking for something like that? Well, maybe Dollar General, where you might buy your favorite snack food, probably made by Mondelez, the guys who make the former Nabisco products like Oreos. Full disclosure, I only own stock out of all except for, let's see, yeah, Dollar General. I don't own Dollar General. So. Also, another thing to note, Walmart stock has been down almost 30% year to date, but was up today by a point. So if you believe they're going to be around for a while, buy now.
What's interesting is that there's a concept of normative goods and luxury goods in economics. And then this kind of highlights the point is that you're saying that, well, everyone should focus on normative goods, things that they absolutely need and have no choice but to buy. And then that seems like it implies in an article that there's going to be a decrease in luxurious goods, which I always find kind of interesting because I feel like money can be made in two ways. Either you service the handful of elites or you service the masses. And this is definitely a play that's geared towards servicing the masses.
Well, I don't think one method wins out over another necessarily. I'm just saying that this is an avenue that people should at least take a look at. So yeah, serving the masses definitely does bring in the revenue for, let's say, your regular banks, right? You can go ahead and invest in them because they service normal people and people who actually pay their debts on time, right? Or you can also invest in publicly traded payday loan companies who deal with people that no one wants to deal with, right? Because they're the risky lenders. But truth be told, these companies make a crap ton of profit. I mean, granted, it's only a matter of time before they get investigated by the federal government or other authorities. But in the meantime, I mean, geez, like, yeah, they may be preying off the poor because they have no other alternative, but they're making a lot of money off of these poor people. It's sad, but hey, let that
Oh,
be on your
two,
conscience, I
two, two,
guess.
two ways of making money, really. Off poor people or off rich people.
Yeah, well, there you go. So, Jimmy Carter is cancer-free. What does that have to do with stocks? The medicine that helped cure his cancer is called Keytruda, made by the folks from Merck. The drug was just approved last September. The pharmaceuticals industry moves along with the sways of government regulation, but stocks in the medical industry usually provide nice dividends. If you are getting close to retirement age, you might be using their products, and it wouldn't hurt to invest in some of these guys.
Which one that provide the cure for
Merck.
cancer? Merck?
Yeah.
Is it what type of cancer is this? Is this just cancers in general, or?
Well, the drug was approved to fight lung cancer, but I think President Jimmy Carter had issues in his, I think it was like lymph nodes. So it was spreading. It spread
Lung
all the way
cancer?
to his brain or something like that, I think.
Really?
And yeah. So then like they use this, and I guess it's like it's not just lung cancer anymore. It's just they're probably going to use it for cancer in general.
Interesting. So which company is has a monopoly on Keytruda.
Merck is they're the guys who make it.
Interesting. Oh, writing that one down. Merck. Hey man, you can cure cancer? I think it's worth something to someone.
Yeah, well. And let's take a look at the week in review. Last Wednesday, we saw a major dip on further scares of commodities volatility, especially oil, where it went back up slightly on Thursday, but still went back down slightly Friday. Overall, the major indexes were down 4% for the week.
Yeah, what's interesting is a lot of news articles kept saying that the stock prices fluctuated because of oil.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. That's a very interesting thought behind it.
Well, let's take a look at today's performance. The Dow Jones sprung back to 103 points, S&P rose 9 points, and the Nasdaq rose 18 points. Mainly because of investor speculation that oil prices will stabilize and strong sentiment that the Federal Reserve will raise rates.
Yeah, it's very interesting because the sentiment regarding lowering rates or keeping rates like higher, like raising rates, has caused the stock market to go up and to go down
Right.
at the same time.
Oh, it's also very interesting in that, I mean, like everyone's speculating that the Federal Reserve will raise rates, but then, no one really has anything for sure. I mean, until Janet Yellen comes out and says, hey, we're going to raise rates.
Well, a lot of it was based on economic report that was released 2 weeks ago, I believe, on Friday, and it's pretty much locked in. Like
Released by the Federal Reserve?
I forgot. It was basically a lot of information was pending that articles released, that report was released, and I think it was released 2 weeks ago on a Friday. So a lot of people were watching the market, and I think the market's been reacting to that report in a way, and like it almost indicates that I think the inflation report or something, I don't remember, it's either labor or something. It's whatever it is that is waiting for 2 weeks, I can't remember. But based on that, it's the entire Feds were waiting on it, and now I think it's pretty shoe in that the rates are going to go up.
Well, I mean, until I hear it, I'll believe it, I guess. But then the other thing is where's this sudden sentiment about oil prices stabilizing? Because for the past, couple months, we've been talking about how OPEC is pumping oil like crazy. So what's this news about oil prices stabilizing? Where did that come from all of a sudden?
It's stabilizing down, maybe.
I don't know about that. Because, stabilizing prices down, it's not exactly going to help the economy any further.
Well, I think I might disagree with that. Is that a lot of I think the oil, the gas prices being high has always caused a price-based inflation. Like basically the cost of everything goes up, and then the ability of regular people to buy stuff has become lower. And I think that because the oil price is going down, that people have more spending power now than they ever did before. Or well, not ever did before, but before the prices went so stupid high. Like filling up a gas tank costs like 60 to 80 bucks. Now people get by with 20 bucks, 25, and they can fill up their gas tanks, assuming a small capacity car. But that is beside the point. I believe that it could cause more spending activity, which will boost the economy up. There's a lot more power to spend, a lot more power to buy, and then that would be another reason for the Feds to increase the interest rates to reduce that spending activity, which has a possibility to impact the whole point is that the Feds oftentimes have been manipulating monetary and fiscal policy to regulate the GDP. And GDP is a basically reflects the commerce and output, and in a way it kind of long story short, I think it might have a positive benefit to the economy. Sales of a lot of retailers could go up because oil prices are low. But the reason why I believe a lot of the stock market stocks have gone down in prices is because probably for a period of time they thought oil would never go down, and it's a safe place to put their money in. And what happened is that, well, oil prices did go down, and perhaps a lot of these stocks have been affected by it because a lot of the equity they don't know what to do with. They just go, well, we're going to use it to buy some commodity or invest in oil, and then before you know it, the oil market didn't stay up, and OPEC decided to just release a ton of oil into the market, then it could drive the prices down. Beyond that, I don't understand why a decrease in oil prices is actually bad for most companies. Walmart needs to ship things left and right,
Well, it's bad for us in that it lowers the price of oil, which means that the U.S. cannot compete with a lot of the OPEC countries in how much oil it generates, or to make oil in this country domestically that's economic. So then what it does is it actually drives these people out of competition.
Yeah, but then I believe that the lowering of the oil prices also seem to affect the S&P 500, right?
I don't know. I mean, affected in a downward way, because I mean, most of these stocks have lost nearly 50% of their valuation.
Well, like another thing to think about is like, well, how does a decrease in oil prices negatively impact Home Depot? Like, how does it negatively impact McDonald's? How does it negatively impact a lot of these giants that are actually on the Dow 30? I don't understand how. I mean, if anything, it's beneficial because you're reducing costs, right? And then if it does impact it negatively, then I have to assume that maybe, I don't know, like perhaps the people who hold up the stock markets are oil barons, and then the prices went down, they have to sell. I don't know, but intuitively speaking, is that as oil prices go down, the cost to do business, the cost of goods sold has gone down. Therefore, there's going to be a higher profit. The consumers have more money in their pockets, especially like regular retail. They're going to be able to buy more stuff. Sales should go up. So I understand why the stock markets would be going down in response to oil prices beyond the possibility that a lot of these companies will simply invest in oil or highly related to oil. Perhaps the people who hold these shares are oil barons or something. I don't know.
Well, all I'm just saying is that aside from this Reuters article, there wasn't really a lot of prior media coverage about the possibility of stabilizing oil when OPEC had already said that they are going to continue pumping more oil to maintain their market share. The only thing that comes closest, and this article does not come close, it merely says that there's a lot of high sentiment, but the only thing that comes close to why this might be is the elections in Venezuela, where last week, while you were gone, I'd mentioned that the right-wing party, I should actually say coalition, had won a slight majority in the legislature. But keep in mind that this is a very fragile coalition and that anything can happen. So one of their objectives is to actually put a cap on how much they produce. So that might help try to stabilize things, but even then, it's not a guarantee that it's going to happen.
I think if the word term stabilize is truthfully be taken as the word stabilize, which means to just stop changing, I think it's a kind of safe call to say the market might be stabilizing. I think it's more of a dangerous call for them to say that the market will bounce back. Like I don't think there's any indication that the market will bounce back. And there's, I think if anything, they're saying that, what, there was a lot of speculation on whether or not OPEC were going to keep pumping oil prices out, but it seems pretty certain they're going to keep doing it. And because of that, the oil prices will stabilize. You can see that. I can see that happening. That kind of makes sense.
All right, well, let's move along and take a look at what's in our portfolio. When I say ours, I mean mine.
So that looks kind of like my portfolio right now.
Well, Friday, it's official. I lost some money, and in order to cut my losses, I sold these stocks: Vodafone, Koninklijke Philips. I got that one on the second try. Caterpillar
Philips?
and Spartan Motors. What is that?
Right. Isn't it Koninklijke Philips?
No. Koninklijke Philips is the gas company, or the gasoline company. No, this is Koninklijke. Oh, damn it! I gotta do it again. Koninklijke Philips. This is the lighting fixtures company. They're kind of like the European equivalent of GE over here. So like they started out with like a bunch of electronics and lights and all that stuff, and eventually they became a conglomerate that's moved on to other sectors like the health sector and other things like that.
I see.
Yeah. So these guys have all been doing pretty bad. Altogether, I lost about $2,000.
Feel your
Um,
pain.
yeah. Should have cut these. I really should have cut these guys off sooner with all the signs. I mean, I wasn't following the 200-day rule we talked about with Paul Tudor Jones,
Hmm.
and honestly, I'm really angry at myself. I mean, with especially with Spartan Motors. Even if I wanted to hedge my bets and to buy puts on them, I can't. I can't do it because all the put options are sold out.
We've
Uh,
looked into this.
yeah,
They're
exactly.
so expensive because
Yeah.
everyone's basically betting it to go down, you
Oh
know.
yeah, yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
I should have sold these guys like a long time ago.
Oh,
Long
well,
time
I had the
ago.
foresight. You know, some of the gas companies I invested earlier this year, they're going down so much. I'm so grateful for having sold them. But I am very saddened by the fact that I didn't short them or put a put on them. You know, I'm like, oh man, ROYT was at like 14 bucks. Now it's at $2, a dollar
Oh
46.
wow.
If had I done a put on it, I would have made $13 per share. That's
Yeah.
ridiculous. Had I done a put, oh man, for a mere $100, I could have probably bought like so many retarded amount of shares.
See, now as an owner of a bunch of oil stock companies, now these are the bigger ones, not ROIT, but like, Chevron and all the other big ones. Um, I'm hurting there too, but those I'm going to hold on to because those guys aren't going to go away for a long time.
That's
Plus,
true.
the other issue is that to sell them, it's like, there's a $25 transaction fee with whatever fees that are on top of that. So it's not worth my call to sell those guys.
No, that's
Now,
smart.
these guys, on the other hand, I mean, I put money into them and they haven't put out. So,
There is a technique covered in I think there's a certain book I read regarding stock options and how to use options to hedge your bets and so on.
yeah,
And
not
one
going to
of the
happen with Spartan at least.
but yeah, one of the techniques is basically to write a put option for your stock, to write an option, and not so much to buy a put, but to write one. And in essence, is that you're writing a put. You're saying that you will, or writing a call. I forget which one. No, a put, that you will sell the stock at a certain price, and you sell the contract that at a later date you will sell your stock for a higher price. And then if anyone want to bet or buy it, then you can make the premium on that. It's assuming that the option does not get exercised and you keep the money. So it's another venue, and I think it's worth looking into a later segment on how to basically cover your positions by using options.
Yeah, well, I'll have to take a look into that.
For sure.
And let's take a look at investing strategies. So while you were gone, I mentioned this a bit, but I figured, keep it on the same subject while we're here. So, like 2 weeks ago, if you remember, we talked about getting out of debt and paying off debts quickly. Last week, I covered ways, and this is the topic, ways to use tax refunds and other rules to keep some of your money. So, I want to get your view on this. I mean, you
Hmm.
can take a look at this little thing and read it and see if they're right or not.
10 ways to save money when you're making minimum wage. Let's see here. Money, talknews.com. What?
What, you can't read it off the screen? Come on.
Oh, I see. I try to say. All right, get out of debt. Build up your savings. Uh, Maintain minimum wage and have children. Income tax credits. See, eyeing the ripe couch in the living room. Resist the urge to spend on windfalls. Put money in the banks. Pay off your creditors. Bank half of your money before you think about spending it. So long story short, it's basically saying be frugal. And
Yeah.
if you have kids, you might qualify for a tax credit.
Yeah.
So is it suggesting you should have a lot more kids? Each one will give you a tax credit. Therefore, if you have a ton of them, you're going to be rich in no time.
For tax deduction purposes, yes. As far as actually spending on kids, no, no.
Yeah. Perhaps maybe, the childhood years, the baby years are actually part of the most expensive, all these diapers. Perhaps what they're saying is adopt a whole mess of kids, and then, but you do not give them as much. You don't spend as much of money on them as you do with the tax credits, and before you know it, you'll be rich.
Yeah, that just might work.
Right? I'm just thinking you could be a schmuck with a ton of foster kids, and you might make money. But that just sounds so sad. But beyond that, beyond that scheme that it might be implied in this article, there is not much else regarding that besides just being frugal. And that's really it. You don't get much back until you have enough um, financial success where you can have a huge loan that dwarfs your standardized deductions. You would not be using something called an itemized deduction. You wouldn't be itemizing your medical expenses. You would not be itemizing your car payments. You would not be itemizing your loans and whatnot, because you simply just don't have enough to. The amount you're getting back from your standardized deduction exceeds your itemized deductions, so it's not even worth it. But if you have a great enough loan, at that point, yeah, maybe, then it makes sense. But if you're minimum wage, there's no way. There's really no way you're going to be able to do that. So if anything, be frugal.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I want to go as far as to say that there is no way at all. I mean, there are ways. I mean, we can cover that in other.
Well, I think the standardized deduction is like 5,500, right? And then if you're minimum wage, you multiply your hourly wage by 2, and that's your salary. That's like 14, and that's really like about nearly 33% tax deduction.
Yeah.
So there's no, I mean, to basically have the same one, you have to have such a huge, there's only a handful of items that you can itemize, and you have to have such great loans and debt and interest payments that it could dwarf your $5,000 standardized deduction. It's, I think, 3,500 standardized deduction, and then you get a certain amount per dependent. And then you have to have that high of a rate to actually offset it. It wouldn't make much sense. That's why I would argue that, yeah, it probably wouldn't be likely, if anything possible. Well, I guess anything's possible, and the law is of infinite possibility, I'm sure, but I would say highly, highly unlikely.
Well, there's another thing as well. I mean, so Fool.com has a similar article on the same subject, and they say that there's something called a saver's credit, which basically the government gives you back like a certain amount of money that they'll pay you. They'll actually put it into your 401k, I think. Let me see here. Yeah, it depends on your income. According to 2015, you have to make less than 36,500 for single filers.
Mm-hmm.
Joint filers. So savers credit. I'll have to look into this, but this is
well,
another option
I could speed through it for you really quickly. There's a line in there that pretty much sums all this up. It's second paragraph, first sentence, right?
Yeah.
The downside of a saver's credit is that it's not refundable credit. So if you don't have any tax liability, you won't get any benefit from the credit. Therefore, this benefit can only be used to pay off taxes. So it won't earn you money, it will save you money on taxes. I mean, best case scenario, you'll pay off all your taxes per year, which, assuming, I don't know, like 10-15%,
No, but it's saying tax liability doesn't necessarily mean that you have like a tax debt of any sort. It just means that like you were talking about, do you have kids? That's a tax liability, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, in the best case scenario, it will pay off your taxes, but you understand that if your income is low enough, you don't even get taxed, I don't think. If it's low enough. I think under $10,000, you don't even have to file your taxes.
Right, yeah, but I mean, like if you're working a minimum wage job, 40 hours a week, you're going to be making about what they say right here, about the 36.5, a year.
Well,
it's going to be about that range.
I mean, well, the article is basically like how to get out of debt. Really, basically sums down to be frugal, and frugality kind of implies that you can save money wherever.
It's not just about how you get out of debt. It's also how do you save for retirement while you're working a minimum wage job. That's the main point. So
Ah,
if you have debts, that's one thing you have to tackle.
yeah, retirement. I mean, if you could put money away into it, that'd be great. Although it's kind of tough. I mean, I'm kind of like a balls deep sort of guy, where basically it's if you say you save 50% of $10,000, that's not gonna be much anyways. You might as well take the money and invest it into something that could pan out for a greater saving, like an investment that could possibly net more in the future, or like put more into um like let's say you have $10,000, you save 10% of it, and but then that's like $1,000, you know. But then if you instead of that $10,000, I don't know, I don't know how to explain it, but I think part of it is that to save 10%, to save $1,000 as a really poor person is really really hard, like very very tough to do. But if you're a well-off person, to save $1,000, is you could do it in a blink in the eye. The effort is near effortless, and
Yeah, of course.
I feel like, you know, if anything, you know, maybe perhaps if you're comfortable with that, you just take on the risk to try to amass more wealth or more income. Then you can use it to set off the savings then, or to basically make up the difference then. I don't know. I feel like perhaps incur the debt and invest it in something. Perhaps buy yourself a book or whatever. Try to become specialized. Use it for training. I don't know. Participate in some educational programs.
Which all cost money.
Yeah.
Some alternatives to what you just mentioned, instead of buying a book, head to your library. That's usually free.
Mhm.
Um, Training, that's going to cost money no matter where you go,
Well,
honestly.
is there like a government public works program where they kind of help train you for free?
Training for like, financial help or what?
Like no, like vocational even.
Yeah, well, no. It's free while you're in high school, the regional occupational program. But as an adult, I mean, it's a very minuscule fee of like, what, usually $10 or $15 or something. Well, no, they might have raised it actually. It used to be like $10 or $15 when we were in high school, but that was a long time ago. So it might be like what, something like $30 or something at this point.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
mean, if you can, let's say this. Let's say you make a minimum wage, $7 an hour. If you can increase your wage by a couple of bucks, you know, then you effectively. All right, so I'm just saying this. It's very simple. I try to keep it very simple. It's that you make $7 an hour. Your annual salary is roughly about 14 grand. If you can get your salary from $7 to $8, you effectively made yourself what, 2 grand. So if you can use that 1 grand to increase your hourly rate by a single dollar, you effectively earn that money back already. You know, like so if in anything, if that $1,000 you're scrimping and saving and whatnot, if you use that $1,000 to pay for the $50 fee, and then the food associated or transportation costs associated with getting to a place and learning things, it will kind of offset itself and pay for itself, you know.
yeah. All right. Well, we got our views out on that one. So let's move
Yep.
along. Let's look at recommendations. A new movie is coming out about a group of investors who were blowing the whistle on the housing bubble and made a fortune. It's called The Big Short and is actually based on the book under the same name written by Michael Lewis. It's out in select theaters in LA and New York.
Oh yeah.
So we should actually go see this.
Oh sure, why not?
You don't sound enthused.
I don't
It's got
know.
Steve Carell, man.
Some
How
rich
bad can it be?
guy, some rich guy making a shit ton of money off other people's mishaps.
It's called learning something, okay?
It's called the game's rigged, rigging the game,
Okay, if you like to call it that.
being in a position to rig the game.
Sure, you know what? The game is rigged. But when I win this one, baby, yeah.
Huh. It sounds like a lot of Republicans, no diss on Republicans, but some Republicans I hear, these policies don't benefit me and don't benefit the poor, but someday I be rich and then it'll benefit me then. I'm like, but you're shooting out every single rung that can get you there. Oh, someday, who knows, I might win the Super Lotto. I'm like, okay, whatever you believe.
Kind of like how Mark Rubio was all like, "Oh, we shouldn't let refugees into this country," but his parents are refugees.
I know. It's almost like everyone forgets about the internment camps and like the race targeting, like isolation and violence.
No, see, your thing is that you understand that it's a bad thing. You don't realize, however, that these people think that all of that is justified. But that is another topic for a different podcast, which we will not cover here.
Sometimes the easiest solutions might not be the correct one. Just saying. All right.
Yep, that's it.
See you guys next week.
Yep.